You don't come across purpose and then all of a sudden it just shakes out and it's a success and your life is like, oh yeah, I came across my purpose and everything was gravy. No. Purpose tends to come with a lot of hardships because of the fact that it takes persistence, but because it is an unwavering light that you constantly see, you put yourself in front of it and move towards it every single day. That's where purpose has a massive, massive difference. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Art of Masculinity. I am finding a way to kind of really wrap my head around a conversation I've had recently, and this had to go, regarding men and purpose. And this is a big topic in the sense of like everybody wants to find purpose. Obviously, it is the driving force for what we do. When we talk about, like, for instance, military and the struggles that men have coming out of the military or first responders have coming out of those jobs and then going into the everyday life, we tend to focus on the purpose aspect of this. But I wanted to go over this as it qualifies for men everywhere, and not only as it qualifies for men everywhere, as it comes from the kind of previous generation and was built upon the societal infrastructure of how we believed and functioned as tribes and as quote unquote civilized groups as we created cities and laws and everything else. So purpose is a big topic. We have gone over it before, but not in this capacity in the way I want to attack it today for you guys. So the first thing is we have to remember that, purpose is that it's the epitome of that thing that just essentially drives us through the good times and the bad times. It's that thing, that fire inside of us that is a direction that we have, that when things are going badly or when things are really deep down and we are struggling, we're like, oh, I am still following this one mission. Like, that is a purpose. It's something that is driving you. It's not just for the good times. I think that's part of the miscommunication of this specific topic is people want to say find your purpose. And I talk about this in my book. I say find passion. Passion and purpose are different. And passion tends to lead to purpose in some capacity or another down the road. But ultimately, when we talk about purpose, people always want to say go find your purpose. But what they're not saying is that when you're actually looking for your purpose, what it's going to look like is something that is going to drive you no matter how dark it gets. I think that is a litmus test for purpose. And I think people need to remind themselves of that, because when it gets really dark, and it does, it's life, we have ebbs and flows, ups and downs. When that happens, our ambitious behaviors, our progress, our drive ceases to exist in those moments, and purpose becomes a guiding post for how we get out of them. So when we talk about how people have persistence and tenacity, how people create success, a lot of the times, yes, it is through grit, and other times, yes, it is through the fact that it was their purpose, okay? And they knew it was their purpose, or it was such a deep passion that it actually became a purpose. It didn't start that way, but it became one, and they recognized it as that when it got dark. These are kind of things that I have come across. Agree with them or don't. I don't really care. We're all entitled to our opinions. But this is what I've come across in my life. And after having numerous conversations with people from multiple different backgrounds, this is what I believe tends to be the common theme. So when we look at the purpose is that driving force that we choose. That's another thing that we have to recognize about purpose. We choose it. It is something that we actually put ourselves in front of every single day. And yes, you can stumble across a purpose, 100%. People have done that. But once you stumble across it, You have to intentionally put yourself in front of it every single day. It doesn't just, you don't come across purpose and then all of a sudden it just shakes out and it's a success and your life is like, oh yeah, I came across my purpose and everything was gravy. No. Purpose tends to come with a lot of hardships because of the fact that it takes persistence, but because it is an unwavering light that you constantly see, you put yourself in front of it and move towards it every single day. That's where purpose has a massive, massive difference. Now, for men, this is I think, and I'm going to go on a limb here. Obviously it's a podcast, so opinions are what these things are made of for the most part, especially when we're talking about human psyche and behaviors. And when we talk about, men, and we talk about how men operate in life, I firmly believe that men are stuck in this in between, right? We were given a task from the inception of society, from the frameworks of civilization, that we were supposed to be the protector and provider. Okay. This was given to us from the earliest days of our ancestors as we created community, and as we started to protect ourselves as a single unit against all of the threats out there. Now, we were given this protect and kind of provider role. Now, as civilization began its structures, a lot of the protection started to kind of sift its way out because we started to create entities that could provide universal protection. Then we started to create laws in which everybody that complied with the societal structure said they agreed with. And all of this kind of took place. Now, it's not to say that protection is not a role for men, right? I again, I firmly believe this as part of my pedigree, part of the man that I am, and part of the masculine framework in which I follow, that a man should be able to protect, and I believe that is part of who I am. Now, that's not to say that that is the end all be all for a man or masculinity outside of me. Okay, again, just remember this. All I'm saying is that that protection has started to ease up, in the sense that it's not necessarily essential, but it's not necessarily been eradicated. Okay. And then part of that, as the provider, meant, food, which then transitioned into money as we created these societal constructs. All of that to say that we created this obligation for men to provide those things, provide that protection, provide that uh, um, food or money, the providing for the family or for the women and the children, right? We created this and we agreed to it. Okay. We agreed to it. We were conditioned for it. We evolved biologically this way. All of that continually transcended generation after generation. Why I say men are stuck in the in between is because it's part of our framework to do those things. It's part of our framework to believe those things. And it's part of our frameworks to want to perform those things. But what happens when you have an obligation that becomes selfless and almost martyrdom at the same time, because it asks for sacrifice? What happens to purpose? Purpose becomes non-existent unless your purpose is to protect. Then that's different. If you feel super called and you're like, dude, this is my thing, then that's different, because it is your purpose and it is tough and it is all those things. But when you actually say, this is my purpose, is to protect, and that becomes also your way of life, i.e., how you provide, then that is a different conversation. But for most men, that's not their purpose. So we're stuck in this in between. We're stuck in the obligations of the societal construct, and we are in this place of desiring purpose, but not understanding how to achieve or seek it out, because we weren't taught that. We weren't given that permission. And therefore now, as society has softened up, as the rigors of life have come to kind of really balance out in the sense that men aren't as dedicated to those roles or have to be as dedicated to those roles for survival purposes. We've been afforded this luxury of being able to look towards purpose, but men don't know how to look towards purpose because we're not taught that. So that in between space is like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to be in this place, the place I started, and I see the place that I wish I could be, and I'm kind of oscillating between the two. I know this past place, how to perform it. I know I inherently am predisposed to it. And this new place, I don't necessarily know how to get there, but I know I want it. And so I think a lot of men today, because men are really struggling in life psychologically, they are struggling emotionally because of all of that. I think there's this conversation of, okay, how do we get guys to see that purpose is okay, and that how do we get guys to really start having that conversation and stop being stuck on the in between, because they are so focused on providing, food on the table and making sure the roof is over everybody's head and making sure the energy is turned on, the electricity is turned on, so you guys can see and have, heat and air conditioning, all those things, right? Like, guys are stuck with this. So the societal expectation of what men were supposed to do has been held on to for many, many generations. We watched our fathers do it. We watched our grandfathers do it. We heard about our great grandfathers doing it. And a lot of this was bottled up in frustration from these other men. Now, it wasn't bottled up in frustration because of the fact that they felt that they were worthless, but what was in the frustration was that through those constructs of obligation of those things, there wasn't a level of expansion and dream chasing that those men could go for. I've heard men talk about it, and they've said things like, oh yeah, men can't chase their dreams because they have an obligation. If you don't meet that obligation, you're not a man. And men that just chase those dreams are not real men because of the fact that they are not actually serving the people who rely on them. Now, a lot of people might want to talk about this and say like, oh, well, that's the patriarchal structure, and like, oh, that's not what where we are now because women can do all of these things and all. Yes, there are levels to this and levels to this conversation as an onion, right? Like, you could peel this back and go down very many rabbit holes. So just understand I'm talking about this basic overarching kind of role, and I'm talking about how this is on just a surface level, the difference between obligation and purpose for men and what causes distress amongst them. We watched how the previous generations had to deal with this. We watched how they dealt with it, and we saw their bottled up frustration. And what did that result in? It resulted in domestic violence. It resulted in alcoholics. It resulted in drugs. It resulted in a lot of negativity in how to even raise children, right? These men, the way they spoke, the way they treated children. It wasn't to say that they the grittiness that were raised in children in generations before wasn't warranted and wasn't actually kind of a good way to raise kids. I firmly believe that kids should have a level of grit and challenge to them. And I believe that is a man's role to do that for them. But there is a healthy way of doing it, and there is an unhealthy way of doing that. And I think that we kind of were exposed to a lot more unhealthy based upon of the fact that these guys didn't really have an option to learn other ways because purpose and other ideas of how to be a man were far outside of the realm of possibilities. Now, getting back to this, does giving up your obligations equal finding purpose? Because I know that's probably a question a lot of people have. And when I started thinking about this podcast episode and how I wanted to deliver this, I was thinking about, okay, if I'm going to say, all of these things that we have these obligations as men, that these obligations as men, the constructs of society told us that we essentially couldn't look towards purpose because we had to perform this sacrificial duty. If I'm going to say all that, then how do we say, okay, Johnny, like, do we have to give all those things up to find our purpose. I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think that you can do both. I really do, and I think that your families deserve both, because men have the the average man in society today, um, globally, not just in Western civilization, globally, typically has the role to still perform the obligations of protection and providing. Okay. And to perform both of those things and to completely disregard them leaves your family exposed. And it also leaves your family wondering where the safe space is for them when the masculine is not there to hold some of the frameworks that we've, one, agreed upon in a societal standpoint, but then two, some of those frameworks that we actually continually hold within our own hearts as men and feel responsible for, right? There's going to be dysfunction sometimes if we look at that and then say, okay, we're going to completely not perform those functions, and we're just going to look for purpose, and we're going to give up those functions. There's going to be dysfunction in a man. There's going to be dysregulation. There's going to be frustration on a different level for him. The point being is that, can we perform those obligations of protecting and providing while also finding purpose? I don't believe you have to drop those. I think that purpose can be found while you're doing those. And I think we have to be willing to be explorers. I think we have to get back to being willing to being adventurous. And I think we have to be able to try and fail. You know, society has really come to a point where we have defined work weeks and work hours, so much so that people believe when they're off of those 9 to 5 hours, right, the banker hours, when they're off of those hours, that work is not to be done unless it's like household chores. I was raised this way, okay? Not only was I raised this way, this has been my life for a majority of it until I got into entrepreneurship. Now, to say all of that was, when I was off after work, that was my time. I did not want to do other work. Like, I worked from 8 this morning till 5 this evening or 4 this evening. I do not want to do more work. I wanted to do my things. I wanted to do Johnny. I wanted to have Johnny time, and I wanted to have relationship time, and the things that don't require me to focus on somebody else's business. Okay. So I've had that. I grew up very blue collar, and that was the only way you made money, was doing that 9 to 5 or doing the work of the obligation. Okay. Then we defined weekends as the break, the end of the week, right? If we're looking at this in breaking down the word, it's the end of the week, right? So now it's our 2 free days. It's our 2 days to find whatever it is we want to do, right? The purpose part. It's the 2 days you get to define your purpose and find it and chase it, right? Like that's what society allotted us as men. They said, yeah, cool, you can try to look for a purpose, but you got to do it on these 2 days off. And those are also the days that you need to combine finding time for your family, if you have it, or finding time for your external obligations, which we all have, regardless of families or not, and getting all of that done as well. So I think there was, not to paint a conspiracy, but I think there was an intentional position from the powers that be to say, hey, if we can keep, especially men, if we can keep them from trying to find purpose, we can keep them doing our bidding and tell them that that's what they're supposed to do as their sacrifice to their family. And we'll never have to worry about them leaving the workforce. And they'll always do the things that we require of them for us to make money, for us to find our dreams, for us to live the happy lives that we desire. And they get to basically fuck off, right? So we have to be willing to change that narrative. We have to be willing to change the narrative of time, to change the narrative of what it means to chase a purpose, to find a purpose, to find passion, right? Find passion first, then purpose. Again, I will always base my perception off of the philosophy of my book until I hear a counter argument that makes me think differently. But purpose doesn't just show up it gets cultivated. Purpose tends to be found in the places we're not looking for it. That means that you have to actually do something first. And the something that you do first becomes passion. So find a passion to follow and be willing to explore, be willing to try, be willing to fail, and be willing to change the narrative around the free time that you have outside of the obligation that you have. I think that's the first and biggest way we can start to change this narrative of defining and finding purpose for men. And if we can do that, then we're going to have more of a conversation around, okay, now if we chase that passion, does it turn to purpose? And how can we make it the way that we provide? How can we make it the way that we provide and protect? Because protect isn't just always physical force of being able to fight. It's putting a house around your family to protect them. It's putting locks on the doors. It's putting security systems. It's all the things that we do to keep us separated from the potential threats outside of our home, outside of the controllable environment that we give ourselves. But that's where we can start trying to mesh purpose with the obligation once we find passion, right? So think about how you're doing this in your life. Are you trying to even cultivate passion? I know for a long time I was not. You can ask my ex-wife, you can ask anybody that knew me back in the day. It's like I would get off work and just like most people, my Friday nights were consistent of drinking, and potentially going out with friends or just drinking at the house and relaxing, watching TV. My Saturdays were for yard work, and then maybe hanging out with some friends again, and then or having some drinks and chilling again, relaxing. I wasn't a big like gamer, so that wasn't my thing. But then Sundays were for like chilling and football, and again friends. Like there was no search for passion. There was nothing there for passion. It was more of, this is my relaxing time. And I think that most people that are listening to this are going to say, yeah, that's kind of me too right now. Or yeah, that's really been me for most of my life. And it's not to say that that is necessarily wrong. I'm not going to shit on somebody for that. But I am going to tell you that if you are actually wondering where purpose is, it's going to start by looking for it in passion in those moments that you think are supposed to be your relaxing time. Now, think about it. Most of us sit behind desks, okay? For the most part, in today's world, a lot of people sit behind desks. So hard work, and that's not to say micro decisions aren't taxing on our brain, but physical hard work is not as prevalent as it used to be. Therefore, that level of relaxation that you believe you need, I think, is far overestimated than what it really should be in your life. Yes, do I believe you need a little bit of mental separation? 100%. This goes for everything, even when you're working. There's the things like the Pomodoro method, that specifically design breaks within a working period, right? We do need that mental break. Our minds operate very, very powerfully, and in the conscious and subconscious way, 100% of the time. But what we can do is say, okay, let's give ourselves that mental break. Let's afford ourselves that time of quote unquote relaxation, but let's also build in time to get to a passion. Let's also build in time to get back to some form of quote unquote work that is following a passion. And it's not necessarily, and I'll tell you guys this too, also from experience, it's not necessarily work when you're following passion. I find that a lot more these days. I don't feel like I'm working as I've taken on entrepreneurship. Now, is it tough? And do I feel like an infant because I'm learning so much? 100%. Do I struggle some days? 100%. But do I feel like I'm actually working all the time? I don't. And the reason why is because the fact that I actually really enjoy chasing this dream, chasing this passion, chasing what I'm hoping turns into a purpose, is a purpose. I know that this podcast is, it's like I've said before on here. Do I believe it's a purpose for me to help men and to help them along their way and to hopefully give some wisdom in which they find their best lives? I don't know that it's a purpose. It's a massive passion of mine. It's looking like it's a purpose because I've been doing it for so long now, and it wakes me up every single day. And I've been sticking with it persistently, even in the moments that it's hard, even in the moments that it's not providing fruit, even in the moments that it's a little bit of a struggle. That tends to be the definition of purpose. So is it looking like that? Sure, for me. But again, like I said, it doesn't feel like work. It feels more like enjoyable. It feels purposeful, and it feels has passion behind it because it's invigorating for me, to talk to the community, to you guys. So think about how you are chasing some kind of passion and just start it. What it looks, I started this podcast while I was doing a 9 to 5 government job for many years. I've done men's coaching and men's work while doing a 9 to 5 job. Like, are you taking action in those times of relaxation? Are we reframing the time that we're given so that we can start to access more time for chasing the things that actually fill our cups soulfully, that fill our cups energetically? Are we doing that? And I found that when I changed that narrative of time, I started to change the narrative of relaxation and the paradigm that I was handed from the previous generations of how work looked and how my spare time looked. So for everybody out there, you have to fight for purpose, okay? It's not going to come to you and all of a sudden you're rainbows, unicorns, and lollipops. That's not the way life works. You have to fight for purpose. It takes some form of grit to get it. It's not do not kid yourselves and listen to these influencers and think that once you find purpose, shit's going to be nice and fun. It's going to get harder and it's going to test you because purpose perseveres when you get tested. So think about, are you fighting for that purpose? Are you willing to fight for a purpose, whatever the fuck it is? You got to be willing to find it by trying to follow some passion. And once you get something that starts to look like it, you're going to have to be willing to fight for it. So are you fighting for that purpose? And do you believe that you will or can fight for that purpose? That's the question I want to leave you with today. So to everybody listening, guys, you are one choice away from being and living that happy life. But that choice ends up having to be made every single day. That choice is having to be made as you reframe your time, as you chase a passion, as you discover a purpose. That choice has to be made all of the time. And you guys have to be willing to do it every single day. All right, everybody. If you love this podcast, then please head over to Apple iTunes, give us a 5-star review. Let everybody know what you love about the show so they can take a look at it themselves and see if it's going to be something that benefits their lives. As I've always said, if we can help one man find his journey, if we can help one man save himself from negative thoughts, then we're doing our job here at the Art of Masculinity. And I am appreciative if you guys help us do that because, as you know, full transparency, that's how podcasts go. We need the support of community so that we can get out there more and more and more, and we can get promoted through the mythical algorithms that all of these platforms have. So please give us a 5-star review. Let everybody know what you love about the show and help us to continually impact the lives of men and women, the women in our lives as well, who do listen to this, who are trying to understand us men. So as always, guys, the world deserves a better caliber of man, and it's our obligation to give it to them.